Hello, and welcome back to Literally Literary. If this is your first time joining us, be sure to check out our previous episodes. This episode, we are continuing our discussion on The Ones Who Don't Say They Love You by Maurice Carlos Ruffin. In this episode, we will be discussing the second half of the collection. I did
You did it.
Leave a review. Did you know you can leave reviews? We want to read them.
Yes.
You know, what are your thoughts? What do you think? But also, what kind of merch do you want to see? If any, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. I think merch is always a good idea, especially to get us out there a little more. I like t-shirts. I like stickers, but that's just me.
Stickers are like a classic. You can't go wrong with stickers.
Yeah.
So that's probably, if we do, where we'll start.
Yeah.
Perhaps. I know.
All right, now we can get started with the second half of our discussion on The Ones Who Don't Say They Love You. Stories.
Right. We thought we would give a shout out to the fact that it is a collection of stories and it's part of the title. So
Yes.
also, I was listening to the first episode or part one earlier. Well, I was also editing it. I made it sound like this was well, no, it didn't, but it could be misconstrued that I did. That this is the first author that we're revisiting, and that's not the case. We have, for example, Angie Thomas. We've already talked about two of hers, so and there's more coming. I know we do plan on, visiting authors that we've read before.
Yeah.
And in that sense, kind of form community with the authors that we read, and we never even talked about visiting Kali, huh? Kali. Okay, sorry, I'm derailing. Let's go back.
No, but I was just thinking about that too because we're gonna read her novel this summer. So yeah, we can talk about the visit.
What do you think? How was it, Vanessa?
It was good.
Vanessa was like lost trying to find.
Yeah, I don't go over there.
I don't go there.
I don't go over there.
Yeah.
It's not my neck of the woods.
Meanwhile, it was Reina's old stomping grounds.
I know.
We got to meet like one of her biggest influences and getting into Chicana literature, and that was really cool. Thank you for that. And
that was very cool. It took everything in me not to just sob the entire time. I was like,
it would have been fine if you did
a
too.
nervous wreck. Yeah, I was sobbing on the inside, trying to play it cool on the outside as usual. It was just a mess on the inside all the time. But yeah, it was cool to go back to my old stomping grounds and just like hang out and go to those readings that I used to really enjoy going to, that I never took for granted, still don't.
Yeah.
I always encourage my students and former students, like, you don't know how cool this is. You don't know, like, these opportunities you have. And
every time, yeah.
They're just like, whatever, we don't care. But yeah, it was cool, and so we were all there, and former co-host Jorge Gomez was there. Shout out.
Hell yeah.
To Jorge. Yeah, it was a really nice reading. It was really exciting to have her at NMSU and for her to recognize you both from like a year ago.
Yeah, right away.
Yeah.
She's
Which is crazy.
Yeah. She's really awesome in that way, and she remembered our names, which was a trip. And what was really cool was getting to see her read live. The performativity of it.
Yeah, that was really cool. She's just a presence, like such a vibrant presence on her own. Like, I don't know why I wasn't expecting her to read like that, but I was like, whoa, this is cool.
So she'll be in Texas, and a little further away. I know. I think her impression is that we drove a little further
Yeah.
Well, it was a not too bad of a drive.
Yeah, I think she thought we were.
You drove all the way here? Like, yeah, we did. Because she's going to be taking a position, in Austin, right?
I want to say Austin.
Anyway, we look forward to visiting her book.
Yes. And a bunch of others that we may revisit. Ben Signs being another one I can think of top of my head.
Yes, and new authors too. From the border.
Yes.
So awesome.
Yes. And since we're talking about like commenting and trying to get more input from the listeners, if you have any suggestions for books that you want us to cover, we'll always welcome that too.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, Vanessa, now you can jump into discussion.
Wait. Let's get our priorities straight and jump into the next section.
I'm just kidding.
Go ahead. I had to. Shameless. Wait. Hold on.
Priorities. Nice.
Priorities.
Priorities.
Go ahead.
So the first one we're going to talk about today is The Pie Man. And I had a lot to say, but I'm going to kind of narrow it down a little bit.
You don't have to, just in case.
Oh my gosh.
You want permission.
No, that's okay. But something that really stood out to me in this one was the way that dialogue is written. And it kind of reoccurs throughout the collection, but it really stood out to me in this story in particular. Okay, guys. Yeah, okay.
Well, I know, Richie, you were talking about the imagery in a lot of these stories. This one in particular has a lot of really great imagery, especially the last image, which we're not going to spoil.
Are we doing this now? Is this a thing?
Doing what?
No, we're not
spoilers?
spoiling it.
Really?
Well,
I feel like
have we always done spoilers?
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about the book.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't mind spoiling.
I think it was usually the first episode where we would be spoiler free, where we just kind of went over an overview.
Okay.
But since we've changed the format, it's just like, well, if we want to talk about I feel like if people are listening, they've read it, or they're trying to they don't want to read for class, so they're like, well, let me see what these guys say about it. All right. So if you're listening right now, I called you out. Just kidding. No. Obviously, you guys enjoyed the book, right?
Right? I'm just kidding.
So
Talking to the audience. We're talking to the audience a lot today.
I know. So we can spoil. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. You know why? Because I was thinking about this too, though. Listening to the first episode, by not talking about certain things, we avoid our getting to analyze specific imagery and outcomes. Having a more in-depth discussion on themes.
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, unless you guys want to stay
No, I won't. I'm not going to fight you on it.
Because the first episode we definitely, well, except for the stuff I said, it was mostly spoiler free. But we kind of maybe sold the book. We're like, well, there's a couple twists here. You're gonna have to buy the book to find out.
Yeah, I didn't want to give those spoilers because they were I really want people to read these stories. True. And then to have that same reaction that we did. Even today we were reading here and gasping every few minutes.
Yeah.
So
I was getting to a really good part, and then Rena's like, "Can you open the door?" And you're like, "No, my momentum."
I'm so sorry.
It's not your fault.
I know. Why'd you lock the door on me? That's your fault. I told you I was coming. Well, so I think some spoilers are okay.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be spoiler free, but the
That's
ones
fair.
that I think are really exciting, maybe we can
the big twists. And
yeah, we can
okay,
hold
that's
off.
fair. That's fair.
Cool.
Okay.
We should have talked about
These
this
are
pre-show.
I know, and oftentimes we talk about the book pre-show, and we say really cool things that we forget to touch on during the
Mm-hmm.
episode. So even after all this time, it's still a work in progress. We're still learning our beats and what
Yeah.
works. Anyway, the Pie Man.
Pie Man.
Yes, the Pie Man.
Why is it called the Pie Man?
Because one of the characters is the Pie Man. The Pie Man is Baby's dad.
Baby is the other
Yes.
main character.
Yes.
Is he a baby?
He's not. He's 14. And he's kind of like figuring out who he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of like rebelling against his mom, especially because now the Pie Man wants to be involved in their lives.
So one thing is that again, Hurricane Katrina, or just thinking about New
yeah.
Orleans, like the way that affected people, and just really hurricane season, storms. It's something that we don't think a lot about here as much, but it obviously it's such a huge thing here. And so this family is I mean, their house is really not up to speed right now.
Yeah.
It smells. There's a lot of mold. It was hit hard. And we were talking about the circumstances, So this is where they're at, and you can tell that they're really struggling. And part of the business that he does, and this other character Sanchez, who is an older Hispanic man, like it seems like they work in construction, right? Working with a lot of the buildings that were damaged and destroyed during the storms, including the school, which I think there's some interesting imagery and symbolism in that as well. But the Pie Man in particular, I think it's such an interesting way of identifying with a character or calling him, right? Because we learn that it's his father. Wait, is that a spoiler? Should I don't know anymore.
I think I already said that.
Yes, we did say it. I'm just
Okay.
being dramatic now.
Stop.
I learned it by watching you. Just kidding. But right, obviously Baby has like no want or need or desire to think about him in life as this, right? So he's the Pie Man. This dude who he does bake pies, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, you were talking about like he's trying to figure out who he is, like any 14-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And he's like running with the wrong crowd, quote unquote. The group of kids who call themselves
the
Mighty BNK, which stands for
Black Ninja Crew with a
Yes.
K.
yes.
Mighty
Yeah.
Black
That's the
Ninja
one
Crew.
on page 77.
Yeah. So they're when you're 14 and easily influenced, not that when you're older you're not also easily influenced, obviously. But
I'm still pretty easy influenced.
Same.
but yeah, like you said, Vanessa, he's trying to find himself and like not having that father figure, or having him but not really emotionally available. He's rebelling against his mom. He's trying to be cool around his friends. All the basic stuff you would expect. And so he's finding himself in these situations where he's trying to like prove himself. And then gets in over his head, I think.
Yeah.
By the end of the story.
Yeah. His friends are interesting to look at. Touche and Turtle. And then there's another one that, of course, is killed prior to this story telling. I do think his background is interesting. So and they call him Baby because he is kind of baby faced. He's super young. I mean, compared to the rest of his classmates. And there's a lot made about like his fro. And speaking of the imagery, I love the way that Ruffin talks about his hair a little bit.
Doesn't he have freckles too?
Yeah, and he has freckles, and I was going to touch on that too.
Okay.
But he calls the fro the fuzzy crown, halo made of rabbit's fur. which I think is nice. But part of the reason why he grows it out is because he also has freckles. His mother is half white, and so that's the point of contention with and ridicule to his classmates. And so I thought an interesting passage was on page 77.
Everything's on page 77.
Yeah, I know, right? uh, there's no trace of the freckles baby got from his redheaded mama. The ones he catches hell for at school. The ones he tried to scrub off after reading the Dred Scott decision in American history the year before. But he knew that even if his freckles won't come off, he could still hold it down for his people like Malcolm X, Tupac Shakur, or Lil Wayne. I underlined that last line because I thought it was an interesting, obviously Lil Wayne's like a big figure and a lot of people do look up to him. I normally wouldn't put him in the same breath as the other two, as historical figures. But I mean, I think it does speak what it does mean to him, though,
Yeah.
and his and his friends and his classmates. So, and it is holding it down, right? So, just thought that was an interesting look into his thoughts, his a little bit of insecurities. He doesn't he want to keep that hair too. He wants to keep that hair. Anyway, yeah. So getting over said, maybe we can move along, but just really, there's a conflict, and it's just like there's the pressure from one of the kids to seek justice for this incident, right, where they did lose their friend. He was shot in the back by this man, and the way they make it sound is that it's gang turf war, but in this particular instance, it sounds like they were just trying to rob an older man of his tools. It's an interesting way to talk about in this entire collection. There's in this particular one there's a Latino presence, right, and you hear a little bit of that dialogue that we discuss a lot in reading other books, right, like about immigration and like coming to the country, and even baby knows enough to say like, well, I know that that's not the case because they've lived here. Like my mom went to school with his son. So I think those are all interesting points that Ruffin brings up, and so I don't know. Did you have anything more before the end of that?
What to pick? I liked the your mama jokes.
Yeah,
I thought that section
that felt
was
very
funny.
authentic and genuine, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And then I thought it was interesting how Turtle is the last one to say one, and then as they're about to start, they realize it's Touche, and he stops himself because of like the circumstances with Turtle's mom. And I thought that was interesting, just because they all take like that precaution to avoid saying anything, but Turtle was like partaking in it, so like obviously like he knew what I feel like he knew what he was doing,
yeah,
but it's like they still took that consideration.
yeah, yeah. Their whole interactions are pretty interesting. Like even this stuff, you mentioned it pre-show how kind of one of the reasons why they're a gang and getting in all this trouble is like to them it would make them cool and get them laid. Like, and I just think it's such like a middle school boy thing like that these guys do, like because to baby these guys are all like talking about like women and getting some. I'm like, you're probably not, guys. Like, it's just something like these kids do.
Yeah. You are 14.
Right. And,
Yeah, but it does seem very authentic. I really like the voice in this one.
your mama jokes, yeah. I and so this one, of course, I was talking about like the images and the imagery, and this is another short story where the last image is so powerful. I just on its like own, it's almost like it's there's the threat of violence, and you have the image of a club covered in nails, and there's no following action from this. It's a frozen image of baby holding this up to incite violence, He's in a bad headspace too by this point. He had been jumped previously right before this, so his head's probably a little messed up, and then plus the pressures of everything else going on, and kind of maybe even touche getting in his head. But
Plus, didn't they get high like right
yeah, and
before
they were
too? So
inhaling. So all that exactly. So
Well,
all
I think
these
that was
things.
before,
It
but
was
they
just
are
before.
drinking.
They were
Well, no,
drinking.
I
No,
think it's like a couple of days before because they get high and then that's when he gets jumped.
on his way home.
okay,
Yes.
Yeah.
And then afterwards they go.
okay.
I think
Right.
it's a couple of days, isn't it?
I thought it was right after.
Is it right after?
He goes and steals the pie man's van because it's fresh
you're
off
right.
his mind.
You're right. Yes.
And you're not thinking straight, and oftentimes that's what leads to bad decisions. It's already happened a couple times in other stories in this, right? But of course, you just have this image of him holding up the club and the nails pointing in every which direction to his victim, to Shay, and of course himself. And I just that there's a little bit of hold on, Chekhov in that for some reason in my mind. Anton Chekhov, right? People always like to refer to his quotes on writing, almost to a point of cliche. But right, I remember one is like, "Don't tell the world that the moon is shining. Show them through the glint of light on broken glass." And I feel like that whole club with nails is that kind of image. The moonlit night, and it's just with the threat of violence in the air. It's a great way to end it off because again, it's not an easy end. It's not like it's open interpretation. Does he follow through? Does he change it? Of course, the implication that this is violence that will follow him.
Which is a recurring theme in
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of these stories.
Yeah. So what's our next
Cool.
one?
The next one is the places I couldn't go, which is like just a few paragraphs, short story about a young couple who got pregnant, and we see it from the male perspective. The decision to get rid of the baby, but then the girl decides at the clinic she doesn't want to do that anymore. And then that kind of takes some turns, and again, it's from the male perspective, so it's like it's only what he is experiencing after the fact.
Which
I
is why
know.
it's so brief.
Yeah, that's probably why. Yeah, she has a change of heart. He responds with, "I thought you were better than this. She left me outside the clinic," which there I feel like is already alluding to the title, "The Places I Couldn't Go." That's one of the places he couldn't go. And then he starts reminiscing about like how they used to be happy and how they used to make out on her mom's couch. It was a very young love. Like, I'm assuming they're teenagers, right?
Yeah.
Well, she was in 2-year college, but she might be. Then he sees her years later, and she has a young boy with her, her son. And he's like trying to get her attention, just looking at her, staring at her, and she won't look at him. And the boy is staring at him, right? But she says, "Don't stare at that man. We don't know him."
We don't know him.
Yeah. And so it's a really short story, again, from the male perspective, just kind of these huge choices and the separation of this couple, and all the unanswered questions, I guess, or the what could have been, because of that choice, right?
Yeah.
I like this one.
For like maybe like a full page of text, again, you have characters that, yeah, I mean, there's whole stories there that are untold. Again, going back to that Virginia Woolf, like characters having tunnels behind them, and obviously there's so much more to that. And I do kind of like this image of this man working at a gas station, and he knows this is his ex, and this could be his son. It's implied, right? And they drive off with some other guy into the sunset, right? Not literally, right? That's me adding to it, right? But again, just as a vignette in this collection of stories is interesting. It's cool, like to tell this brief little like type of human interaction that happens. If you wanted to, you could expand that so much more, right? Into like what happens after they break up, and her maybe raising the kid on her own, or whatever, meeting this new guy, and maybe he's supportive, and but we only get, like you said, his perspective, where it's so brief, where they're young. He decides not to really support her. She decides, and for her, that's it. She's like, no, I'm done. Even to the point where, like, when he does try and go back and visit, her mom's like, no, she's not here.
Yeah.
Closes the book on that chapter. So it's good storytelling in that way. But what do you guys think about the next one? Spinning.
There's 4 parts. 4.
4.
Yes. 4.
This one's like the standout kind of the collection, and is unique.
Yes.
From the collection. So I don't know what your thoughts were.
I read each one of these, so each one is titled 1, 2, 3, and then 0. And they read like poetry, kind of.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like recurring images here too, of like parents battling cancer. Is it the mother and the father?
Yes.
And these images of like the cigarettes, death, grief, those kinds of things. But just the way that it's told is very unique, like you said, Richie. Yeah, it's hard to follow, like to know the span of like how long between each one of these. Like, what did you guys figure that out? Like the years maybe in between these.
Yeah,
If
it sounds like
there's
it
a
jumps
logical
around
transition. Yeah, I don't think it's
from time, like linear.
linear.
I don't. Yeah, definitely some
Zero
great
comes
imagery.
back. Yeah.
Yeah, because it goes down. It goes to 0, and I guess spinning. Like I'm just thinking that they get into an accident.
That's what I got too.
It's just maybe that that image or metaphor of like kind of being in a spinning an accident is like he ends with this will always be this it's some intense like because the previous sections are all about his parents and like mortality, dying and death, and how their decisions have led to these things, right? The cigarette smoking, and he's 4 years old here, experiencing this near death experience, or this collision, and the movement and fright, and also the slow motion of it. I feel like it's a interesting way to like bow tie all these little sections together. And it is most unique in that it does feel like poetic prose, right? And then that they have unique line breaks and maybe some more abstract lines. It's a little harder. It's a little harder to interpret, too, comparatively. Then.
Yeah, I came back to it a few times, and I still have a lot of questions.
So if he were like here right now, or if we were on a call, what questions would you guys ask him about this one?
What does it all mean?
What are all the answers?
Yeah.
I don't know what I would ask.
But it is like a departure from all the other ones.
Yeah, it is.
And it's right, like smack in the middle of the book, too. I feel like. Totally, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe a question like, what his editors thought like about this. Like, do you really
Mm.
want to include this in this collection of short stories? Because it does seem like a standout piece
Mm-hmm.
on its
Mm.
own. Like, it should
Mhm.
be part of a different collection. Even though we have
Yeah.
some of those themes that are
Yeah.
recurring and stuff, it's not like any other
Yeah.
piece.
At the same time, we get like again more stories of people living. I imagine living in New Orleans, and
Their
that kind of
experiences,
stuff,
yeah.
and that kind of stuff really has an impact on people. Losing, obviously losing parents, cancer, all that. Awesome. We just got approval. Okay, now you get the approval for Maurice.
That's
Thank you so
awesome.
much. That means you first of all you listened to the first episode. So I know that
Yes.
sounds so random of a shift right now.
Sorry.
But as we
That was
as
my
we
bad.
were no as we were having a tough time coming to words and ideas, Vanessa got a message from Maurice, who said we can call him Maurice. Perfect. So that settles that
So
question.
That settles that.
And that means everything though when
Yeah,
they
that's
actually
nice.
Yeah.
listen and respond. So thank you so much.
Yes, that's awesome.
Now we just need to ask you to be a guest on the podcast.
Stay tuned. No, I'm just kidding.
We can come back to spinning, but
Busy lives. Yeah.
um, Vanessa and I really liked Fast Hands, Fast Feet.
I didn't.
Yes.
Well, did you? You didn't
I-
agree with us?
You didn't voice anything.
I was
I'm
like
just
I
kidding.
was nodding I was nodding aggressively.
Oh my
Okay,
gosh.
so you liked it too. Yeah, I like this one. Again, kind of discussing like struggles, different types of struggles. The characters in this story, I don't know, they're what's the main character's name? I forget. Do we know?
I don't believe we get her name.
I think she's just referenced by other people, but not by name.
Okay. And I didn't even catch that it was a she.
Is it not?
Well,
I just
that's what
assumed.
thought.
Don't know. You're both saying she, so now
Where is
I'm
it?
like, oh
It's because
crap.
it says
It's also kind of like the relay of their experiences. Sounds like it's one of a feminine character.
on 102.
Yeah.
Ain't got to run from me none, girl.
So Sergeant
Oh.
refers a couple times about like girl
Oh.
references, but also they're
Right,
like the
right.
way they relate their experiences of kind of being harassed in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like it's
yeah.
a woman experience or feminine identifying at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So their struggle is not having a home, trying to like find scraps here and there to sell, to just get by every day. And that experience and who they run into, who the kinds of people who are also on the street struggling, and they're all different but same, in their struggles, and we get this perspective of our protagonist, our main character, and so she's kind of just like struggling with her own experience, but then she's taking on other people's experiences and like trying to say, oh, I'm not, like, I can't be brought down by you, like I have my own stuff to worry about. So she's in her head a lot, which is really nice for us as readers because we get to see
Yeah.
how she navigates, a day in the life. Meeting this other character, Sergeant. Then we have another character. What's the other character's name?
Queen Elizabeth II.
Or the second. Queen Elizabeth. At first I was like, whoa, how'd she make a cameo in this one?
I was like, what's going on here? And then I was
man.
like, okay.
I had a lot of questions with this one too. A lot of it wasn't as straightforward. And I think because the main character is struggling so much with like what she should be doing, or like should she be helping out Sergeant? She's saying she doesn't want to, but she is still like forming this bond with her. And at one point, she even talks about, well, family and like not having family. Does that mean Sergeant is your family now? Queen Elizabeth too? Because they're all experiencing similar.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I thought this one had a lot to do with like love and like how to receive it, I think, mostly. So kind of like what we've talked about with the main protagonist. Kind of she talks about all of her different experiences, like being harassed and having to run from the police. And then so she finds this picture and this pile of stuff that she takes. And I thought it was interesting the way that she describes the picture. So on 103, it says, "She got happy cheeks and I love you forever eyes. I wonder what she wanted from whoever she was looking at." And it's kind of this idea of like using her looks to get what she wants. And that's the way that the protagonist seems to look at love. And then there's like a contrast shortly after on 105. And Sergeant's looking at the picture, who we later find out is related to him. But on 105, it says, "Sergeant stare like there ain't nothing in the world except for that picture. Nobody ever look at me like that." And kind of like this desire that she has to kind of feel that same love. But she was kind of talking like that love isn't, she kind of looked at love as not a feeling, but as a way that you can get what you want. So I thought that that contrast was really interesting.
Okay.
That's cool.
Yeah, I didn't think about it like that too much. I mean, I think that's one of the more memorable scenes, right? Is when she has that thought. I was looking more at the demographic of homelessness. Sounds like it's really bad here, right? You have a lot of people like these makeshift kind of almost towns where you have communities forming, and I think homelessness is one of the least things. I mean, people avoid it in many ways, talking about it, thinking about many of the issues that lead to it. For the most part, a lot of people want to dismiss as a mental health kind of thing. It's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes it's people that are let down by society, and then even here you see how Sergeant actually is someone who did service and is in this situation, right? Because he wasn't the owner of the car she was robbing, right? He was staying. He was in there to stay warm. And so he's looking for comfort in finding a community, and so in that lock it's actually right his daughter, who's not there anymore. She was killed, right? I think he said.
No, you just said she dead and long gone.
She died, yeah. So she's not around, and maybe in some ways, kind of sees the daughter in this main character, because I think ultimately it's also about them just trying to survive. That's all what it is, right? Because her natural instincts are all about survival, and obviously people have made it really hard to trust others. So that's why she is the way she is and thinks the way she does.
Yeah.
But I mean, you also see the police presence and brutality involved with that. I mentioned that in part one. How that mostly their presence in the book has been an antagonistic one, and I just think obviously this is a more modern narrative that we're hearing more of. In the past we always talk about heroes, and yes, that's still the thing too. But again, if we're exploring the I wouldn't say the lower frequencies. I keep referring to Invisible Man, but again, the types of cultures and subcultures and the types of people who bubble up from the street. Again, to invoke the beginning quote, You know, I think that's worth mentioning that this is how they are seen and how they project that type of power onto them. So
Mm-hmm.
Sergeant gets beat up a little bit, right?
Mm.
Brutalized, and
Yeah.
they help each other, they save each other, survival in pure survival mode. So I do think it's interesting in that way.
Yeah.
Whew, sure do talk a
That's
lot.
a really good point. No, that's a really good point. I like that. And I'm glad you brought it up because it is something we've been talking about. The like I like how you said the antagonistic police presence um, towards certain marginalized groups and how it's not coincidental. It's very real. Um, and it just goes back to the whole idea of like survival and what we have to do. And even them, they felt in some cases, in some parts of the story, um, okay, we're gonna have to run, or make sure you do this, or like they're already anticipating having to move, right? Anything else you want to say about this story? Fast hands, fast feet.
There's so much to say. um.
This is going back to the picture.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The protagonist likes that picture, not knowing who this person is, and like wanting, like
just
kept
wants it.
taking it.
Yes.
So that was interesting too.
She almost didn't give it back too when he mentioned it.
Yeah.
And she also takes it back.
Mm-hmm.
So that's funny.
And
Also, like, yeah, there was a situation where she was gonna leave, but she ends up staying.
Yeah.
Like when there's like, well, maybe there's.
yeah, that's why I'm questioning
And
like
it leaves
her
it kind of open ended in a
motives.
way too.
Yeah, because she's like, oh, you know, this quote unquote cripple arm or like lame arm person, sergeant, is gonna kill himself in his sleep while he's dreaming. Um, so saying all of these things, sounding like she doesn't care about him, or like he's just, um, you know, gonna hold her back or whatever. But she sticks around, you know, and takes care of him in a way.
Yeah.
And those are choices that she's making despite what she's thinking or saying, despite how she's presenting herself to us. Reading this, she's still doing these really like nice things, and yeah, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Oof. Oh man, these are like I use the word vignettes. That's what it feels like. You know, he's just like little episodic like glimpses into people's everyday lives, and especially the ones that aren't usually caught up in the limelight. So election. I don't know. Do you guys have anything
It's
about that
one of
one?
those. No.
It's a very different story, right?
Yeah.
You kind of have like the other side of like the popular politician and like their scandalous affair, but it's told from the point of view of the person who he's having an affair with. It's pretty another short piece, but I thought it was interesting, and I
Yeah.
also he's another one of those who don't say they love you.
And I don't think he will.
No,
No.
and
She knows that.
she knows that, so
Yeah.
she like stops him from talking at the end.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
She's 21, but she already knows.
that's right. That's what. Yeah. Should I believe you love me?
Yeah.
Right. It's like no, shut up.
Well,
he-
actually, don't say
He
anything.
lies in every other moment in his life, so of course. It's not saying anything about politicians, right?
I was about to say like, oh yeah,
He literally says that. Where is it?
No, I know.
Where is it?
She asked him, "Do you believe that?" Yeah. No.
Part of the job
One
description
total.
is to make people believe.
Mm.
To make
Yes.
people believe, not to say or do what's right. Like,
Yes.
he's very particular about how he says that.
What do you guys think of the spar?
I liked this one. I'm Carlos. I'm just kidding. But not really. I'm not kidding.
That one kind of reminded me. Okay, this one should have reminded me of a meme.
You're gonna share a meme?
What is the meme?
Are we doing memes now?
Yeah.
What is
Go
it?
ahead. Say what is it?
No, it's just like there's I guess maybe there's a couple of variations, but like it's kind of like the nerdy kid in high school getting bullied, and then like but he goes on to become successful,
Yeah.
and then the dude's like miserable. So here, I just think it's an interesting take on. I mean, it's just the way the character's tone shifts from the beginning, the very very beginning to the end, and it's another short piece, but
Yeah.
you know he kind of gloats in the fact that he bullied this kid,
Yeah.
right? And he's obviously he's down on his luck and not doing well. Like and we never get this other kid's story, but we can glean that he did something. You know, he after getting bullied so much, he gets into fighting and he becomes a big time boxer fighter.
Yeah.
Right to the point where he shows up all successful in town, and whereas this dude has not done much for his life.
Yeah.
Trying to show off, he's like, "Oh, we used to spar. We were sparring partners."
Yeah.
and I like the way he just kind of rejects them, like that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Hell yeah,
That's my favorite part.
No, I also really liked that tone change. And that it ends there, right?
yeah.
So we can kind of
Yes.
like imagine just how defeated he is, but not just that. It's like he said that in front of his family.
Yeah.
Because he was trying to gloat in front of his wife and his kids. He's like, "Oh yeah, we used to spar together." Like that never happened. But he did say, "Yeah, I know who you are." Like,
I do know people like
Yeah.
that too. Who,
it's really interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I introduced you to this person, so I take credit too for your success or whatever. I don't know.
No, you don't.
Oof. Oh man. Yeah, the next one hurt a little bit too. I don't know if you guys have notes on that one.
Yeah, I did. I liked this story. It was so sad.
Yeah. Something like that.
This one, I felt the frustration, you know, of, and it's from the point of view of the son, but like, just again, and that's the thing though, how poverty is kind of a loop a lot of times, and yeah, it was kind of hard to sit through, you know. I don't know.
I think that this one also deals with like addiction. And I thought that this one had a really interesting way of doing it, especially from the son's perspective, because the son is able to consciously recognize that they're not doing so well financially, and so he's constantly trying to work and trying to earn money.
And he worries.
Yeah, and he
That's a big-
worries.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, it says, "Mama say you gotta help her quit drinking for good this time. She promised $5 for every bottle of booze you find around the place you live." And then it ends with saying, "You find 9 whole bottles, you going to be rich." And just kind of his idea of like, I'm still getting money, like I'm gonna be okay, kind of, but like it's coming from his mom. It's like, and they're kind of still in the same place. So I thought that was really interesting. Kind of like, because he just has this obsession with the money and he doesn't really, I don't think he really recognizes the problem so much. Just like the problem that she has with alcohol, he just recognizes the problem that they have financially.
That's a good point. But I think in the end, when she pulls out the flask from her purse when they're at that Chinese restaurant, and he realizes, oh, I guess I'm not going to get the money
Yeah.
for those 9 bottles, right? But then he says, I'm not really surprised by that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those interjections that I agree with you, Vanessa, that he's like just tunnel vision, got to make money, got to help out. The single mom, and we're struggling, and I've got to mow lawns, even though he's really young or whatever. He understands these things, these financial hardships. And I think he's also now starting to understand
Yeah.
his mom's problem, which is his problem too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does say that towards the end. So it's hard. It's rough to
Yeah.
read
Yeah,
the
that
story and
was-
to talk about it and think about it. There's a lot of parts in the story that it just feels like such an interesting role reversal, because he does seem like a little more like a parent, like worrying about these things, like what are we gonna do, and the money, and she's just like, we're not that bad for us, like on page 119,
Mm.
um, where he sees some free stuff. I'm trying to think now what this
Yeah,
was, but she's like,
towards the top. It's a box of mugs.
box of mugs. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We don't go through nobody's trash, she says, but this is all free stuff. You get a mug and rub it like a genie lamp. We could sell these to people and make some money. Put that down, Mama. Clench your wrist. The mug crack on the curb. We ain't that hard up, right? So like he's still thinking about money and like, oh, I can find these, these things and help our situation. But she's like, we'll be fine. We'll be okay. We'll figure it out, right? When their car is getting towed, and he's like, oh no, my mower is in the car. Again, freaking out, stressed. How are we going to pay for the tow company? Like, it's like, we'll figure it out.
I also think that quote that you brought up, the where she says, "We ain't that hard up," it's also like, it kind of implies that it's like it kind of hurts her pride, like that he's bringing this up, like that he's feeling this responsibility, and so she's like, "Stop." She's trying to shut him down from like trying to from him feeling the need to feel that responsibility.
Right. She does say that a few other times,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I think so. Yeah.
Just reminding him it's not something you need to worry about. I mean, he's like, obviously it is. And he feels bad because he's pointing out how his father left, and starts to blame her a little bit. So there's these moments of where we can definitely see his resentment kind of coming through in the story towards his mom, but he's not outright telling her he resents her, or like, what are you doing, mom, or
Yeah.
attacking her in any way. He's telling us as we're reading this, or he's kind of thinking it, until he does later on in the story, he does say, right, like,
Yeah.
it kind of does blame her, but then he feels really, really badly about it immediately after. So, yeah. Catch what you can. I wanted to ask you both what you thought about the end, like the whole lobster ordeal, and like him resisting wanting to try it. Like after a while he changed his mind. He's like, "No, never mind. I don't want to." And then she leaves to go to the bathroom, presumably to drink. I don't know. What do you think, Vanessa, about that whole scene?
I think like they just lost their appetite from like the conversation on its own. Like the guilt kind of made them lose their appetite. But then kind of seeing like that their mom isn't gonna like get better, or isn't really trying to get better.
Right.
It's, I guess for me it was kind of this idea of, I have food now, I should just eat it because who knows how long, kind of thing.
And it was free.
Yeah.
That was a whole other
Yes.
thing we skipped, but yeah, that makes sense. What do you think, Rishi, about that last scene in the story?
Well, it seems like he's accepted a lot of his mother's decisions, and also the point where like he could say "I told you so." He could get angry, and he doesn't, because he sees how much he's struggling. And in the end scene, you just have this moment of just purely him by himself, where he does decide to try this, and then up to that point, they hadn't really, he never really considered what lobster is or how it tastes, because they kept calling it like crawfish, very different thing. And so for the first time, well, not the first time, well, yeah, probably he's tasting lobster, right? But the way it's described is it's just this sweet, succulent thing that he's about to eat, right? It smelled like honey.
We should have brought lobster.
It ain't like
That's what
to
we should have
to
brought.
fit our theme.
Dang, next time.
Let's go catch some. But
No, we're
I
thinking
just think
po'
it's
boys.
that little twist, where he's
Yeah.
fully on his own and able to experience this and
Yeah.
have his experience that. And you also just see a lot throughout the stories too. Is just some of the economic troubles people have and closing businesses always being closed down or moving, having to move.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think that leads into the last story. I know there's a couple others we probably don't have time to talk about.
dang it, time.
But the last story before I let go is all about that. It's all about this woman who has been in this home for generations. It was her mom's home and her mother before her, and it's been passed down. But of course, there's white people moving into the neighborhood, and it's all of a sudden desirable, and coffee houses popping up, and so it's nothing new.
See, a lot of
It
gentrification.
happens,
No.
especially in a city like New Orleans, I'm sure. And so she's struggling. She has all these jobs. She has a daughter who's the other side of the world, and so we're with her, trying to see and empathize with this experience of, do I let go of this home that has been passed down to me? Do I give in to gentrification, to the stealing of our homes, of our culture, of, it's a tough decision, right? And especially with her struggling so much and having to be a maid and then having to be an au pair, how she calls herself, a mammy, having to do like food delivery services, having to do like TaskRabbit stuff, like everything, all the things. She's like, I'll do it. And even then, it's not enough. There's all these letters she keeps getting from potential buyers who are just trying to exploit.
Yeah, it's
These
like a
people.
corporate take, right? Because they even emphasize the fact that they try and mimic authenticity of like natural handwriting, but it's clearly not.
Yeah. Yeah. She's like, I know nobody lives in that
Those
home.
notices. Oof. Yeah, this one was quite the read. I don't. Before I go, Vanessa, go ahead. I don't want to. I'll let you go first.
Okay.
I don't want to. Yeah.
So I had one specific line that I want to talk about real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So on 137, I liked the contrast that happens here. So if it says, if she was in a movie, her neighbors would hold a fundraiser for her at the last second. And towards the end, that kind of happens, but not like that. And so it's like, kind of, I got like this hope feeling. I was like, oh, they're going to help her. And then it kind of turned out that they just had very different opinions than she did.
The new neighborhood association.
Yeah, the neighborhood association.
Yeah, it's at that point where she starts to recognize some of the things she loves. Noticing that one day her neighbors were all different, and she didn't feel as safe hanging out outside, and she could actually enjoy her neighbor practicing his instrument, his trumpet. They did present something. She's like, "Oh yeah, that's true," but then they probably started to go a little too far. Yeah, this one touches on it like in a way that we hadn't in the rest of the stories, like just gentrification, and so obviously with New Orleans, it's such a cultural hotspot. It's such a big tourist city, and you see the way people's homes, and of course, as people buy homes and change stuff, right, her value goes up, and so she's struggling.
Yeah.
You said, and just even struggling with the idea of her mother owned it and her grandmother before that. Like that's also something that's really important to her.
Yeah.
I think on one of my lines was on 135, one of my strong lines, so to speak,
It's probably the same one that I had.
about the black and white. You go ahead.
No, go ahead. But it was like that whole paragraph for me,
Same.
actually.
Yeah, no, like I drew a whole line.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
so she in this instance she's talking about her friend slash sometimes or more ex lover Colleen, who is white. And so upon reflecting on that, I think it just speaks on a huge theme of this entire story. And for another thing, she's white. Like the people moving in and buying up everything in Trem. Damn it. I do this every time. This is why you made me read it, didn't you?
No, I didn't know. I don't know how to pronounce that word.
What would you have said?
Trim or trim.
Because there's no like accent, so
There's no accent, so I don't think it's trimme.
yeah. But I want it to be. It sounds fancy.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Especially because everything else is French.
In Trim, the black and white issue isn't just a black and white issue. It's a money and power issue too. But it's no accident that people with money and power tend to look like Colleen. It's a little bit even foreshadowing her future employer in Eileen. Oh, Colleen, Eileen, interesting. I thought that was an interesting point in early on, and I thought it's like a central theme here of maybe not just this one, but a bunch of the other stories that we've read.
She's even like after that, she's still talking about comes down to who's willing to take without asking.
Yes.
She and her neighbors losing their homes because they can't stop them. Stealing education, stealing housing are also in the same family, right? So this like taking or ownership from those who are coming in and invading, because it is an invasion. Oftentimes they have no control over that. And that's how she feels right now too. She's trying to control as best she can with all these jobs, and it's like thousands of dollars that she needs to pay in taxes she can't afford anymore. It's just driving them out, right?
Yeah. Plus, it briefly touches on the systemic ways in which this happens, right? Where it's, through committees and commissions and judges who rule on these things, and
They don't think about the people associated with these homes and the culture and the generations and the memories and all of those things that are so important. It's just like, oh, well, is this going to make money for the city? Okay, we'll approve it.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought the end of so I didn't finish reading that section, so you could finish that part. Cause,
okay, yeah.
Yeah, because I liked the like in a way that's such a callback to the beginning of that page or the top of that page too. Building houses and building food are in the same family. I thought it was clever to revisit that later on with stealing education and stealing housing are also in the same family. So again, great job on Maurice there.
I know. Gracias. There's also other like stories, and you touched on Colleen being Galia, her ex-lover, ex-coworker, and there's also this other character, Derica, I want to say.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more substance. It's not just about housing and all the stuff that we're talking about, but
which is it's so authentic and so real, right? Of dealing with all that stuff too.
Yeah, Derica too. Like she's
Having a fling,
having this
connection.
fling. She's a maid. She's also moonlights as like a musician. So everyone has like their multiple identities.
Yeah. And again,
Microaggressions, lots of other stuff.
even the casino hotel that they work for obviously ends up changing ownership, so they have the whole thing where they all lose their jobs. There's a lot of nice complexity in this piece, and it is the longest one in the entire collection.
And the last story too.
Yeah.
before I let go. So the title,
You had a revelation right now when
I
we
mean,
were
it wasn't
reading,
really a
and you're like, "Oh, the
revelation.
title."
I was just like, oh, now that I'm looking at the title again after I just finished the story, it it makes it even more sad. I'm just like, no, that means she's gonna let go of the house and she's just like
Exactly.
reminiscing, or she's just thinking about all the things that brought her here, and she's, I don't know if she's finally decided, but it seems that way.
God damn, that is heartbreaking. Why did you do
Yeah.
that? Why did you do that? No, that's true.
Yeah.
I mentioned the similarity in that in the title Rhinoceros, for example, where it's not till the end where maybe you can refer back to like, oh shit, this is gonna happen, to even kind of the image of the trumpet player getting accosted by the police at the end shows that the neighborhood association betrayed her suggestions, her thoughts to be like,
No,
just
like,
like,
think about it.
yeah,
It's like they want everything that New Orleans represents, but
why
they
are
don't
they
want to
there?
be bothered with noise, or like, come on, like, it's New Orleans. That's what she was saying about the brass bands, about the musicians,
So one
about
of my favorite points there is how
Yeah.
she mentions that
This is New
well, they
Orleans.
practice. You know why we're like famous for our music is they have to practice. They have to play their music, and it's just such a kitsch way. Again, we were talking about tourism, how it's called out a lot as well, and how it
Yes.
might contribute to this, right? Gentrification and people getting kicked out of their homes, and just you have like the facade of something with, and then you have like the crumbling like base or foundation of why that's so important and why that's there, where eventually it's not going to have a soul, and I think that's kind of one of the battles she's having to let go. Fuck.
Yeah.
It reminded me a little bit of like the Super Bowl, and how they were trying to move all the homeless community from that area in Inglewood because they didn't want any of the tourists to see the reality that is Inglewood. And so they're like, oh, like we're gonna have this great, Super Bowl, lots of money bringing in, but you can't see the ugly side. It doesn't exist if you don't see it. So it reminds me a lot of that. This is just one other example, but they want all the nice things, the food, the culture, the music, but they don't want to acknowledge all these other realities that make up this city just as much as the food and music and everything else does, right?
Damn. These are kind of like the ones who don't say they love you. There it is. Whoa. Like it just,
Yeah.
but it's like having a respect and appreciation and of the people who live there, and
And not turning
just
a
the ones,
blind eye.
everyone.
Right?
Yeah.
Everyone. And
Yeah.
everything that comes with it. You can't just pick and choose what you want from New Orleans or any city or the border,
It's a full
right?
thing.
Yeah.
Dude, this is a great collection.
This was a great
Because
collection.
I mean, we're getting on the longer end of our usual episodes, but I feel like we could easily talk about. We did skip some. We could talk more in length, But I think this is a testament to what Carlos has done. What? Maurice Ruffin.
He said you could call him Maurice, and now you're
He
calling
didn't
him
say
by his
Carlos.
middle
He
name.
didn't give us the okay on that one.
I have no idea what.
He didn't give us the okay on Carlos, just Maurice.
Beer. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. But okay, fine.
Start over. I'm just kidding.
I tap out.
No, that was really, yeah. I enjoyed this collection. It was hard to read, but
Yeah.
it's necessary.
It's already shortlisted, right, for
I believe so.
Ernest J. Gaines Award. So worth mentioning.
That's cool. It's great.
I can't wait for him to talk more about it as well. Something we talk about often on this podcast. one of the beautiful things about getting to read contemporary authors is just getting to like hear them talk about their works more and more, and just see how people respond and react to it, and so on and so forth, how they react to that. So I want to see where this book goes, and hopefully you guys listening have picked up a copy, recommend it to your friends, and let's keep people reading.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Literally Literary, recorded at Power at the Pass and brought to you by Border Senses. This episode, we continued our discussion on The Ones Who Don't Say They Love You by Maurice Carlos Ruffin. If you haven't read it, we hope we inspire you to pick up a copy. Join us on our next episode, and follow us on Instagram at literallyliterary.ep and on Twitter at literallylitep. Thank you.
We'll have us a